My parents always said, "Your brother is the smart one, you're just the pretty one." So I showed them how smart the pretty one could be. They'd been saying it since I was 7. Report cards, science fairs, spelling bees, everything was about Ethan's genius. Meanwhile, I got enrolled in pageants and modeling classes. Play to your strengths, Mom would say, adjusting my posture. Not everyone can be book smart. By high school, the narrative was set in stone. Ethan, MIT bound. Me, hopefully married well. Family dinners were Ethan discussing quantum physics while I was asked about my skincare routine. Nobody noticed I had a 4.0 GPA. Nobody cared that I'd placed 3rd in the state mathematics competition. The same year, Ethan placed 5th. The college acceptances should have been my vindication. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, full rides to all 3. But when I showed Dad the letters, he just patted my head. "These diversity quotas are really something," he said. "Good thing you photograph well for those applications." That's when I decided to stop fighting for recognition and start planning for revenge. I chose Princeton, not for the education, but for the connections. Specifically for Professor Grayson, who ran the most prestigious economics internship program in the country. The same program my father had been rejected from 30 years ago. A rejection he still mentioned after 3 drinks. For 2 years, I played the part perfectly. Posted sorority photos on Instagram. Let Mom brag about my social success. Never mentioned my double major in economics and computer science. Never mentioned I was writing algorithms that investment firms were already trying to license. Junior year, I secured the Grayson internship. When I told my parents, Dad laughed. "They probably needed a pretty face for the brochures," he said. Mom nodded. "Just don't embarrass yourself, sweetie." The internship led to a job offer at Stratton Capital. Starting salary, $400,000 plus bonuses. The managing director, Roland Vance, had been Dad's college roommate. The same roommate who'd built the empire my father spent decades trying to join. But I turned down Stratton. Instead, I quietly incorporated my own fund using the $50,000 I'd earned from those algorithms. I named it Athena Investments. Goddess of wisdom and warfare. Seemed fitting. For 6 months, I operated in stealth mode. My AI-driven trading system outperformed every major fund by 300%. When Bloomberg finally noticed the mysterious new player dominating the markets, I stayed anonymous. Let them speculate. Then came the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Dad's company, Brennan Industries, the family legacy my brother was supposed to inherit, hit trouble. Bad investments, worse management. Stock price tanked 60% in a week. They needed a buyer or faced bankruptcy. I made my move through shell companies, acquiring 51% of the shares at rock-bottom prices. Total cost, $3.2 million. Pocket change after my fund's first-year returns. The hostile takeover announcement was scheduled for Monday's board meeting. This morning, Dad had called me panicking. "Someone's buying us out. 20 years of building this company and some vulture fund is circling." "That's terrible," I said, examining my manicure. "Maybe Ethan can help? He's the smart one." But Ethan was useless. His theoretical physics PhD hadn't prepared him for corporate warfare. He'd been calling me all weekend, begging for advice. I gave him just enough bad information to ensure he'd make things worse. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., I walk into that boardroom. They'll see the pretty daughter they dismissed, holding the papers that make me their new boss. The presentation is already prepared, how I'll restructure everything, fire the dead weight, including my father and his cronies. Mom called an hour ago. "Wear something nice to Sunday dinner tomorrow," she said. "Ethan's bringing his girlfriend. You know how accomplished she is." I smiled. "I'll wear something special." The hostile takeover papers sat on my desk, next to an acquisition offer for Stratton Capital itself. Turns out Roland Vance had been embezzling. My forensic accountants found everything. By Wednesday, I'll own the company that rejected my father and the company he built. But there's something else. Something I haven't told anyone. The embezzlement case against Roland wasn't the only thing my team uncovered. 6 months ago, while doing due diligence on Stratton Capital, we found a pattern of fraudulent trades that traced back 15 years. The kind of fraud that destroys pension funds and retirement accounts. The kind that sends people to prison for decades. And my father's name was all over it. Not as a victim, as a willing participant. I spent 3 weeks verifying everything. Bank statements showing wire transfers between Dad and Roland. Emails discussing how to hide losses from investors. Documents proving they'd knowingly sold worthless securities to elderly clients while pocketing millions in commissions. In 2008, when the market crashed, they doubled down. While people lost their homes, Dad and Roland made another fortune shorting the housing market, using insider information from Roland's position at Stratton. They'd built their empires on the broken backs of thousands of families. The statute of limitations hadn't run out, not even close. I have enough evidence to put both of them away for 30 years minimum. The Securities and Exchange Commission would kill for what's sitting in my encrypted files, so would the FBI's white-collar crime division. But I wasn't going to just hand it over. That would be too easy, too quick, too merciful. I wanted them to understand exactly what was happening. Wanted them to see who was dismantling everything they'd built. Wanted them to know that the daughter they'd dismissed as decorative was the architect of their complete destruction. Sunday dinner was going to be much more interesting than Mom anticipated. I chose my outfit carefully. Not the designer dresses they'd bought me, expecting me to land a wealthy husband. Instead, I wore a tailored charcoal suit from Brooks Brothers, the same brand Dad wore to important meetings. My hair pulled back in a severe bun, minimal makeup, the platinum Patek Philippe watch I'd bought myself after my first $1 million quarter. I looked like I belonged in a boardroom. Because I did. Ethan's car was already in the driveway when I arrived. A Tesla Model S he couldn't actually afford on a research assistant's salary, financed by the small trust fund Grandpa had left him. The same grandfather who'd left me nothing because pretty girls don't need money, they marry it. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key. A small gesture, but symbolic. This wasn't my home anymore. Hadn't been for years, even when I still lived here. Mom opened the door, her face lighting up with that performative enthusiasm she reserved for social situations. "Sweetheart, you look so professional." The way she said professional made it sound like a criticism. Board meeting tomorrow morning, I said, stepping inside. Wanted to get in the right mindset. Her smile faltered slightly. A board meeting? I didn't know your marketing job had those. I told them I worked in marketing for a small tech company. They'd never asked for details, too busy discussing Ethan's latest publication in some obscure physics journal that 6 people would read. Recently promoted, I said. Lots of new responsibilities. Dad appeared from the study, whiskey in hand. His third of the evening if the glaze in his eyes was any indication. There she is, our little social butterfly finally gracing us with her presence. Wouldn't miss it, I said. Sunday dinners are so important for family unity. The sarcasm went completely over his head. Ethan emerged from the living room with his girlfriend attached to his arm. Cassandra, pre-med at Johns Hopkins, came from money, old Connecticut money that made my parents salivate with social climbing possibilities. She had that effortless elegance that came from generations of wealth and private schools. Oh my God, I love your suit, Cassandra said, and I could tell she actually meant it. Unlike my mother's backhanded compliments, this was genuine. Very power executive. Thanks, I said, studying her more carefully. She had kind eyes. Intelligent. I almost felt bad for what was about to happen to Ethan. Almost. We settled into the dining room. Mom had gone all out. Her best china, the crystal glasses, fresh flowers from her garden. The table could have been in a magazine spread. She'd always been better at appearances than substance. So, Cassandra, Mom began as she served the first course. Ethan tells us you're top of your class at Hopkins. How wonderful. I've been fortunate, Cassandra said modestly. The program is incredibly challenging. I'm sure it is. Mom's eyes sparkled. And what does your father do? He's a cardiovascular surgeon. Mom runs a nonprofit for children's literacy. Mom practically glowed. Dad leaned forward, suddenly interested. This was exactly the kind of pedigree they'd dreamed of for Ethan. That's fascinating, Dad said. I was just telling my partners at the club about Hopkins' medical program. Top tier, really top tier. I cut into my food, letting the conversation flow around me. They'd cycled through Cassandra's accomplishments, her family's connections, their country club membership, before Mom finally remembered I existed. And how's your little job going? She asked, turning to me. Still doing that marketing thing? It's going well, I said. Actually, I have some exciting news. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me. Ethan looked suspicious. He'd been trying to reach me all weekend, and I'd ignored every call. I'm switching companies, I continued, taking on a new role with significantly more responsibility. That's wonderful, honey, Mom said in the tone she might use to praise a child's finger painting. What kind of responsibilities? Running a company, making executive decisions, restructuring operations, that sort of thing. Dad chuckled. Director of marketing, are they calling it? These tech startups and their inflated titles? Not director of marketing, I said. CEO. The table went silent. CEO? Ethan's voice was sharp. Of what company? I took a sip of wine, letting them stew. Well, as of Monday morning, I'll be the CEO of 2 companies, actually. 2 companies? Dad's smile was indulgent, like he was humoring a child's fantasy. Honey, you can't just become a CEO. It takes years of experience, connections, board approval. You're right, I interrupted, which is why I built the experience over the past 4 years. And I don't need board approval when I own controlling interest. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Own? Controlling interest? What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone, pulling up the press release I'd scheduled to go out Monday at 6 a.m., turned the screen toward them. Athena Investments completes acquisition of Brennan Industries. The color drained from Dad's face. That's impossible, he whispered. Athena Investments that's the fund that's been buying up shares. That's me, I finished. I'm Athena Investments, have been for 4 years. Ethan stood up so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood. You're lying, there's no way. Sit down, Ethan. My voice was calm, cold. You're embarrassing yourself. He sat, but his hands were shaking. I don't understand, Mom said, looking between me and Dad. How could you possibly... Where would you get the money? I earned it. I set my phone down, the press release still visible. While you were all busy celebrating Ethan's mediocre achievements, I built a quantitative trading algorithm that outperformed every major hedge fund on Wall Street. I started with $50,000 and turned it into $47 million in 3 years. Silence. That's impossible, Dad said again, but his voice had no conviction. He was staring at the press release, his whiskey forgotten. Your company was hemorrhaging money, I continued. Bad investments, worse management, and some truly questionable accounting practices that I'm sure we'll discuss later. The stock was trading at $3 a share when I started buying through shell corporations. Paid an average of $4.50 per share for 51% of the company. Total investment, $3.2 million. Dad couldn't seem to form words. Monday morning, I'm walking into the boardroom, your boardroom, and I'm implementing some changes, starting with replacing the entire executive team. I smiled, including you. You can't do this. His face was turning red. I built that company from nothing. 23 years of my life, built it from nothing. I laughed. Dad, I've seen the books. Real books, not the ones you show investors. You built it from embezzlement, securities fraud, and systematically destroying the retirement funds of hundreds of families. His face went from red to white. Mom looked at him. What is she talking about? Nothing, he said quickly. She doesn't know what she's talking about. This is revenge for some imagined slight. Imagined? I pulled out a folder from my bag, placed it on the table next to the salad bowl. Here's a wire transfer from March 2007. $50,000 from Stratton Capital's operational account to your personal account. Here's another from June 2008. And here's an email from Roland Vance discussing how to hide margin losses from the SEC. I spread the documents across the table like I was dealing cards. Here's my favorite. December 2008. While the economy was collapsing, you and Roland were shorting housing securities using information Roland obtained illegally from his position at Stratton. You made $4.6 million while thousands of people lost everything. Cassandra was staring at Ethan, who looked like he might vomit. You knew, she said quietly. You knew your father was under investigation. No, Ethan said quickly. I didn't. I don't. Yes, you did, I said. I sent you the preliminary findings 3 weeks ago. You deleted the email without opening it. I have the read receipts. Ethan's jaw clenched. You're destroying this family. No, I corrected. I'm exposing it. There's a difference. Mom was crying now, not the delicate tears she produced for sympathy at charity events. Real, ugly crying. How could you do this? To your own family? Funny question, I said. I could ask you the same thing. How could you dismiss everything I achieved? How could you make me feel worthless for 17 years? How could you celebrate mediocrity while ignoring excellence because it came from the wrong child? We loved you. You loved the idea of me. The pretty daughter you could parade around, hoping I'd marry someone who'd give you grandchildren and social status. You never loved me. I stood up. But that's fine. I don't need your love. I don't need anything from you anymore. I gathered my documents, sliding them back into my folder. Monday morning, Dad. You'll receive a formal termination notice. You'll have 30 days to clear out your office. Your severance package is generous. More than you deserve, but my lawyers insisted. You'll also receive a separate package from my attorneys detailing the federal investigation that will be launched Tuesday morning. Federal investigation? His voice cracked. Securities fraud. Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Insider trading. The SEC is very interested in your activities. So is the FBI. I picked up my bag. I'd recommend getting a good lawyer. You're going to need one. Dad lunged at me. Ethan caught him, holding him back while he shouted obscenities I'd never heard him use. You ungrateful bitch. After everything we gave you, you gave me nothing, I said calmly. Everything I have, I earned. Everything you have, you stole. I turned to Cassandra. Run. You seem like a genuinely good person. Find someone better than him. She was already gathering her purse. Mom grabbed my arm as I walked past. Please, please don't do this. Think about the family name. Think about what people will say. I have thought about it, I said, removing her hand. I thought about it every time you dismissed my achievements. Every time you compared me unfavorably to Ethan. Every time you made me feel like being intelligent was somehow unfeminine or inappropriate. I met her eyes. And I decided I don't care about the family name. Let it burn. I walked out to my car. Behind me, I could hear shouting, breaking glass, Mom's wailing. I sat in the driver's seat and pulled out my phone, opened my email, found the draft I'd prepared weeks ago, addressed to the SEC, the FBI, and 3 major financial news outlets. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it, the point of no return. Once I sent this, everything would explode. Dad would go to prison. The family name would be destroyed. Ethan's association with the scandal would follow him forever. Mom would lose everything. The house, the cars, the country club membership she valued more than her daughter. They'd all hate me. The extended family would take their side. Cousins I'd grown up with would never speak to me again. I'd be the villain in every family story. The ungrateful daughter who destroyed her own family. I sent the email. Then I drove to my apartment in the city. The penthouse I'd bought outright, no mortgage, in a building with security cameras and a doorman who would keep reporters away. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. My phone started ringing. Dad, Mom, Ethan, numbers I didn't recognize, probably family members who'd heard the news. I turned it off. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. This was everything I'd worked toward for 4 years. Instead, I felt empty. The next morning, I woke up at 5, put on another power suit, this time navy blue. Did my makeup with extra care, knowing cameras would be everywhere. Drove to Brennan Industries headquarters by 7. The parking lot was already full. News vans, reporters. Someone had leaked the story. I'd expected that. Nothing stays secret for long in the financial world. I parked in the executive spot that used to be Dad's, walked past the shouting reporters without answering questions. Security let me through. I'd sent them my ID and authorization yesterday. The boardroom was on the 23rd floor. When the elevator doors opened, I found 5 lawyers waiting. 2 from my firm, 3 from the company's. Ms. Brennan, the lead corporate attorney said, we need to discuss. The transfer of power is legal and binding, I interrupted. I have controlling interest. The paperwork was filed with the SEC on Friday. This isn't a negotiation. The board is requesting. The board will do what I tell them to do, or I'll replace them. Your choice. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked into the boardroom. 12 board members sat around the table. I recognized most of them. Dad's friends, business partners, the same men who'd patted my head at charity functions and told me I'd make some man very happy someday. Dad wasn't there. I'd specifically barred him from the building. Gentlemen, I said, taking the seat at the head of the table. Let's begin. For the next 3 hours, I outlined my plans, restructuring the management, divesting from questionable investments, implementing transparent accounting practices, partnering with the SEC to clean up the mess Dad and his cronies had made. Several board members tried to object. I reminded them that I held 51% of shares and could replace any of them within 24 hours. They stopped objecting. By noon, I'd fired 6 executives, promoted 3 junior employees to senior positions, authorized forensic accountants to review every transaction from the past 10 years. By 3 p.m., news outlets were reporting on the hostile takeover. Mysterious fund manager seizes control of Brennan Industries. Most articles focused on my age, my gender, my appearance. The 25-year-old financial prodigy, former beauty queen turned Wall Street powerhouse. I hated it, but I'd expected it. Tuesday morning, federal agents arrived at Dad's house at 6 a.m. I know because someone sent me the video. Dad in handcuffs being led to an unmarked car while Mom screamed at the agents and reporters swarmed the lawn. I watched it twice. Felt nothing. By Wednesday, the story had exploded. Dad's arrest was front-page news. Roland Vance had been arrested simultaneously at his home in Connecticut. Financial analysts were estimating they'd defrauded investors of over $90 million across 15 years. The think pieces started coming out. The daughter's revenge, how a young woman took down her father's empire, pretty face, deadly mind, the rise of Athena Investments. I ignored them all. Thursday, I closed the deal on Stratton Capital. With Roland under arrest and the company's reputation in tatters, the remaining board members were desperate to sell. I paid $40 million for a company that had been valued at $200 million just a week ago. By Friday, I owned 2 companies and controlled over $3 billion in assets. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was in my office at midnight, staring at financial statements and trying not to think about Mom's phone calls. She'd left 17 voicemails. I hadn't listened to any of them. Ethan sent one text. I hope you're happy. I wasn't. Cassandra sent one too. Thank you. Found the engagement ring he'd been hiding. You saved me. That one made me smile. 2 weeks later, Dad's trial date was set. The prosecution had an airtight case. My evidence, combined with what the SEC had uncovered, painted a picture of systematic fraud that had destroyed lives, retirees who'd lost everything, families who'd had to sell their homes, people who'd trusted Brennan Industries and Stratton Capital with their futures. The victims started reaching out. Emails, letters, phone calls, some thanking me for exposing the truth, others cursing me for not catching it sooner. One woman sent me a picture of her late husband, who'd committed suicide after losing their retirement savings in 2009. Your father killed him, she wrote. I hope he rots. I started sleeping less, working more. Threw myself into restructuring both companies, rooting out corruption, implementing oversight, made enemies of every corner-cutting executive and every board member who'd looked the other way. Someone slashed my tires, spray-painted "Family Destroyer" on my building, sent death threats to my office. I hired more security, kept working. 3 months after the takeover, I finally listened to one of Mom's voicemails. Please, her voice was hoarse from crying. Please talk to me. Your father might go to prison for 20 years. They're seizing our house, everything we own. I don't have anywhere to go. Ethan won't talk to me, says I enabled this. Says I chose your father over both my children. A long pause. Maybe he's right. Maybe I did. But you're still my daughter. Please. I need help. I deleted it. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Mom sitting in that house, surrounded by boxes, watching everything get taken away. She'd been complicit, yes. She'd chosen ignorance over protecting her children. But part of me still remembered her tucking me in at night, reading bedtime stories. Before Ethan was born and everything changed. I called my assistant at 2 a.m. Buy the house, I said. Put it in a trust. Let her stay there. The Brennan house? Your childhood home? Yes, anonymous purchase. She can't know it's me. Understood. I hung up and stared at the ceiling until morning. The trial started in April. I wasn't required to testify. The documentary evidence was enough. But I attended every day, sitting in the gallery, watching Dad's lawyers try desperately to create reasonable doubt where none existed. Roland Vance took a plea deal, testified against Dad in exchange for 15 years instead of 30. His testimony was devastating. He had emails, recordings, documents proving every transaction, every fraudulent trade, every lie they'd told regulators. Dad took the stand in his own defense. Big mistake. The prosecutor, a woman named Diana Chen, tore him apart methodically. Every answer led to 3 more questions that exposed another lie. By the time she was done, even his own lawyers looked defeated. Mr. Brennan, she said, did you ever consider the families you were destroying? I was providing for my family, he said. Everything I did was to give them a better life. By stealing from other families? I made business decisions. You made criminal decisions. You knew the securities you were selling were worthless. You knew retirees were investing their life savings. You knew and you didn't care. His silence was answer enough. The verdict came back after 4 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. The judge scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later. I walked out of the courthouse and found myself face to face with Ethan. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes. His tenure-track position at the university had been quietly rescinded. Nobody wanted association with the Brennan name anymore. Satisfied? He asked. No. He laughed bitterly. At least you're honest about it. All this destruction, and you're not even happy. Were you? Living off his money, knowing what he'd done? I didn't know. You knew enough, I said. You just chose not to look deeper. Same as Mom, same as everyone. So we all deserve this? Mom losing her home? Me losing my career? The whole family destroyed because you needed to prove you were smart? This isn't about me being smart, I said quietly. It's about him facing consequences. About the people he hurt getting justice. About stopping it from happening to anyone else. Noble, Ethan sneered. Very noble. Tell that to Mom when she's living in a 1-bedroom apartment working retail because her daughter destroyed everything. He walked away before I could respond. That night, I doubled the anonymous trust fund I'd set up for Mom. Made sure she'd have enough to live comfortably, even if she never knew where it came from. Dad got 24 years. He'd be 79 when he got out, if he survived that long. Roland got 15. 3 other executives from Stratton got varying sentences. The victims' restitution fund I'd set up distributed $120 million. It wasn't enough to replace what they'd lost, but it was something. 6 months after the verdict, I restructured both companies under new names. Brennan Industries became Athena Holdings. Stratton Capital became Athena Asset Management. I wanted nothing carrying the old names forward. I implemented the strictest compliance protocols in the industry, hired former SEC regulators to oversee every trade, made transparency a core value, started a scholarship fund for women in finance. Forbes ran a cover story, the 26-year-old who disrupted Wall Street. They wanted to interview me. I declined. I'd had enough of being looked at, enough of people judging me by my appearance while ignoring my accomplishments. I wanted my work to speak for itself. A year after the takeover, I got an unexpected visitor. Cassandra walked into my office without an appointment. My assistant tried to stop her, but I waved her through. I need to talk to you, Cassandra said. I gestured to a chair. She sat, Lucas. I'm sorry for how I reacted. She started. At dinner, I just I didn't know what to say. You left. That was the smart move. He called me last week, said he wanted to try, said his family was destroyed and he needed someone. But that's not why. She pulled out. I'm graduating from Hopkins. I was planning to do my residence. But I've been thinking about what you said, about doing something meaningful. She slid the folder across my desk. It was a business plan. A free clinic, I read, for families affected by financial fraud. Medical care, mental health services, financial counseling, she explained, for people who lost everything and can't afford treatment. I have connections at Hopkins. I know other doctors who'd volunteer, but I need funding. I looked up at her. Why are you bringing this to me? Because you're the only person I know who actually cares about making this right. Not for publicity, not for recognition. You set up that victims fund anonymously. You bought your mom's house and didn't tell her. You could have let everyone burn, but you're trying to build something better. I studied the business plan. It was thorough, well-researched, thoughtful. I'll fund it, I said. Full funding for 3 years. After that, we'll evaluate based on outcomes. Her eyes widened. Really? On one condition, you run it. Not as a side project during residency, full-time. Make this your career. She hesitated. I've wanted to be a surgeon since I was 8. You can still practice medicine, just in a way that helps people who actually need it, rather than people who can afford private practices. She was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. Okay. We shook hands. She left with a commitment for $5 million in startup funding. I sat alone in my office looking at her business plan. For the first time in over a year, I felt something other than anger or emptiness. I felt hope. 2 years after the takeover, my companies had tripled in value. Athena Holdings was the most profitable mid-size firm in our sector. Athena Asset Management had become known for ethical investing and transparent practices. I'd been profiled in every major business publication, received awards I didn't want, been invited to speak at conferences I declined. The attention made me uncomfortable. I still felt like the girl being dismissed at family dinners, even when I was standing on stage being called a visionary. Cassandra's clinic opened in Baltimore. Within 6 months, it had served over 3,000 patients. She'd recruited 15 doctors to volunteer. The outcomes were remarkable. Families getting mental health treatment they couldn't afford. Financial counseling that helped people rebuild. Medical care that prevented small problems from becoming catastrophic. I visited once. Watched Cassandra treating a woman whose husband had lost everything to Stratton Capital. The woman had deferred her own cancer treatment because they couldn't afford it. Cassandra was explaining how the clinic would cover everything. The woman started crying. I thought I'd have to just die. Let it kill me. So my husband wouldn't have to watch me suffer and know we couldn't pay for treatment. I left before anyone could see me crying too. Mom eventually discovered the trust fund. One of her neighbors saw the purchase records and mentioned it. She called me for the first time in 18 months. The house, she said. That was you. Yes. Why? Because you're still my mother. And despite everything, I don't want to see you homeless. She was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm sorry. For all of it. For every dinner where we made you feel worthless. For every achievement we dismissed. For choosing comfort over truth. I'm sorry. I know. Does that change anything? No, I said. But it's a start. We didn't have a relationship. Not a real one. But she sent birthday cards. Called on holidays. Small gestures that acknowledged I existed as more than the pretty daughter. It was more than I'd had before. Ethan disappeared from my life completely. I heard through extended family that he'd moved to the West Coast, took a teaching position at a small college, published occasionally, had a girlfriend who worked at a bookstore. He never contacted me. I didn't contact him. Some rifts are permanent. 3 years after the takeover, I sold 30% of my stake in both companies to a consortium of ethical investors. Made $400 million on the deal. Kept enough shares to maintain control but spread out the risk. I was 28 years old and worth over $700 million. And I was lonely. The success felt hollow when there was no one to share it with. I'd sacrificed relationships, family, any chance at normalcy, all for revenge that left me wealthy but isolated. I started therapy. My therapist, Dr. Ramirez, was blunt in a way I appreciated. You achieved your goal, she said in our 3rd session. You proved you were smart, successful, capable. You made your family see what they'd overlooked. So why aren't you satisfied? Because it doesn't undo anything, I said. My parents still spent 17 years making me feel worthless. That little girl who wanted her father to be proud of her, she's still inside me, wondering why she was never enough. Was this about justice or validation? I didn't answer. Justice doesn't heal wounds, she continued. It just stops new ones from forming. If you want healing, you need to do the harder work. The harder work apparently was forgiving myself for still wanting their approval even after everything, for mourning the family I'd never had, for accepting that some damage is permanent. I started painting, something I'd loved as a child before Mom decided it wasn't a marketable skill. Bought a studio space, spent evenings covering canvases with color and emotion I couldn't express any other way. I was terrible at it, but it felt good. 4 years after the takeover, Dad wrote me a letter from prison. The handwriting was shaky. He'd had a stroke the previous year. The letter was 3 pages, single-spaced, the writing of someone with too much time to think. He didn't apologize. Not exactly. But he acknowledged, finally, that he'd been wrong about me, that he'd been wrong about a lot of things. I told myself I was building something for you and your brother, he wrote, that the ends justified the means, that providing material wealth was the same as being a good father. I see now how wrong that was. You didn't need my money, you needed my respect, and I was too proud and too blind to give it to you. He wrote about prison, about the men he'd hurt, about lying awake at night thinking about the retiree who'd committed suicide, about finally understanding what I'd been trying to show him. I don't expect forgiveness, he ended. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I see you now, really see you, and I'm proud of who you've become, even though I did nothing to help you get there. You're brilliant, you're strong, you're everything I should have told you that you were 17 years ago. I read the letter 5 times, cried through 4 of them. I never wrote back. But I stopped having nightmares about family dinners where nobody saw me. 5 years after the takeover, I met someone. Her name was Mira. She ran a nonprofit that provided microloans to women starting businesses in developing countries. We met at a conference I'd been guilted into attending. She had no idea who I was, just knew I worked in finance and asked if I'd look at her organization's investment strategy. We got coffee, talked for 4 hours. She made me laugh for the first time in months. I have to be honest, I told her on our 3rd date. I have a complicated past. My family it's a mess. There was legal stuff. It got ugly. I know, she said. You know? I Googled you after our first coffee. She shrugged. You took down your father's fraudulent company and exposed securities fraud. Seems pretty straightforward to me. My family hates me. Your family was complicit in defrauding thousands of people. I think that says more about them than you. I fell in love with her. It wasn't dramatic. Wasn't the sweep you off your feet romance from movies. It was quiet, steady. She met me where I was. Damaged, but healing. Successful, but uncertain. Still figuring out who I was beyond the revenge I'd built my entire adult life around. 6 months into our relationship, she asked about my paintings. They're angry, she observed, studying a particularly violent abstract piece in reds and blacks. I was angry. Was? I looked at the painting, at all of them covering my studio walls. Years of rage poured onto canvas. I don't know what I am anymore. Maybe, she suggested gently. It's time to figure that out. I started painting in different colors, softer tones. Not because the anger was gone. It wasn't, might never be completely, but because I was more than just that anger. 7 years after the takeover, Mom got diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. Ethan called to tell me. First time I'd heard his voice in 5 years. She needs care, he said. Full time. I can't afford it. The family resources are gone. I know. I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for her. I arranged for Mom to move into the best memory care facility in the state. Private room, 24-hour nursing, all the treatments that might slow the progression. Anonymous donation again. But Ethan figured it out. Thank you, he said in a voicemail. I know we'll never be okay, but thank you for this. I visited Mom once. She didn't recognize me. Such a pretty girl, she said, patting my hand. You remind me of my daughter. She was very beautiful. What happened to your daughter? Oh, I don't know. She went away somewhere. Busy with her life, I suppose. Young people are always so busy. I held her hand until she fell asleep, cried in my car for an hour afterward. Dr. Ramirez asked me how it felt. Sad, I said. Not angry, just sad. That's progress. Is it? She doesn't even remember dismissing me. Doesn't remember any of it. She just sees a pretty girl and thinks I remind her of a daughter she barely knew. Would you rather she remembered? Rather she lived with that guilt? I thought about it. No, I guess not. The daughter who needed her mother's validation. She's not 7 years old anymore. She doesn't need it now. Then why does it still hurt? Because grief isn't logical. You're not just grieving what was. You're grieving what never was and never will be. 8 years after the takeover, I proposed to Mira. We got married in a small ceremony. Her family, a few friends. Cassandra came, brought her wife, no one from my side. During the reception, Cassandra pulled me aside. The clinic just opened its 4th location, she said. We've served 50,000 patients, helped 3,000 families avoid bankruptcy from medical debt. That's incredible. None of it would exist without you, she hugged me. You're not just the woman who took down corruption, you're the woman who built something better. I cried at my own wedding, happy tears this time. Mira and I bought a house upstate. Nothing ostentatious, just a comfortable place with good light for painting and a big yard for the rescue dogs we adopted. I still ran my companies, but remotely now. Promoted people I trusted to handle daily operations. I was learning to be more than my work, more than my revenge, more than the pretty daughter who'd burned down her family to prove her worth. 10 years after the takeover, Dad died in prison. Heart attack. Quick and relatively painless, according to Ethan's brief email. There was a small service. I didn't attend. Sent flowers instead, with no card. Ethan sent me Dad's personal effects. A watch I'd given him for his 50th birthday. A photograph of the 4 of us from before everything fell apart. I was maybe 5, sitting on his shoulders, grinning at the camera. A letter addressed to me, sealed. I waited a week before opening it. You were right, it read. About everything. I built my success on other people's suffering. Dismissed you because it was easier than acknowledging my own failings. Treated you like an ornament because I was threatened by your intelligence. I destroyed this family through my pride and my crimes. You didn't destroy it by exposing the truth. I did. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you this when it mattered, when you still needed to hear it. I hope you've built a good life. You deserved better than the father you got. I added it to a box in my closet, along with Mom's old voicemail. Ethan's bitter text from years ago. All the artifacts of a family that existed only in fragments now. Mira found me sitting in the closet, crying. You okay? I don't know what I feel. She sat down next to me. You don't have to know. You're allowed to feel complicated things about complicated people. I wanted him to suffer, to know what it felt like to lose everything, to face consequences. I looked at the letter, and he did, and it doesn't feel like I thought it would. What did you think it would feel like? Satisfying, victorious. Instead, it just feels empty. He's dead. Mom doesn't remember. Ethan hates me, and I got exactly what I wanted. Did you? I thought about it. About the 17-year-old girl making plans for revenge, about what she really wanted under all that anger. No, I admitted. I wanted them to see me, to value me, to treat me like I mattered. But by the time they did, it was too late. The damage was done. So what do you want now? That was the question, wasn't it? I want to stop defining myself by what they did to me. I want to build something that's mine, not a reaction to their dismissal, not proof of my worth, just mine. Mira kissed my forehead. Then do that. 12 years after the takeover, I stepped down as CEO of both companies, promoted from within, people I'd mentored who shared my values, kept my board seat but handed over daily operations. I was 37 years old and done with corporate leadership. The business press called it shocking. The youngest female CEO to build a billion-dollar company walks away. Speculated about my reasons, health problems, family planning, burnout. None of them guessed the real reason. I was tired of performing. I started a new venture, an investment firm that focused exclusively on women-owned businesses. No interest in massive returns, just sustainable growth and helping women who reminded me of 17-year-old me, brilliant but dismissed, talented but overlooked. I met them in person, listened to their pitches. Many of them cried when I wrote the checks, said no one had ever believed in them before. I believe you, I told each one, not because of your projections or your credentials, but because I see what other people miss when they only look at the surface. The firm was moderately successful. Some investments failed, most succeeded. A few became extraordinary. But the metrics I cared about weren't financial. They were the women who sent me photos of their storefronts, their first employees, their daughters working alongside them. You changed my life, one wrote. I thought about how different my life might have been if someone had believed in me, really believed, not just praised my appearance. If my father had seen my intelligence instead of being threatened by it. If my mother had valued my achievements instead of my marriageability. But then I wouldn't have become who I was. Wouldn't have built what I'd built. Wouldn't have helped the people I'd helped. Trauma doesn't make us stronger. That's a lie we tell ourselves to make suffering meaningful. But we can choose what we build from the wreckage. 15 years after the takeover, Ethan reached out. I'm getting married, he wrote. I know we haven't spoken in years. I know there's too much between us to ever really fix. But she's important to me, and she asked if you'd come. She says family is family, even broken family. I discussed it with Dr. Ramirez. Do you want to go? I don't know. Part of me wants to believe we could be siblings again somehow. The other part remembers every dismissive comment, every time he got credit for my work, every time he benefited from the system that failed me. You don't have to decide based on what's fair. You can decide based on what you want. What did I want? I want to not care anymore, I admitted. I want to be indifferent, but I'm not. I still care. Still hope stupidly that maybe we could salvage something. That's not stupid. That's human. I went to the wedding. Small ceremony at a vineyard in California. Ethan's fiancée, Rebecca, taught high school physics. She was warm and funny and clearly loved him. He looked older, grayer, but more at peace than I remembered. We didn't speak until the reception. Thank you for coming, he said stiffly. Rebecca seems wonderful. She is. He paused. She knows everything. About Dad, about the company, about what I said to you. She thinks I should apologize. Should you? He looked at his shoes. I was angry, scared. Everything I'd built my identity on was connected to Dad. When you exposed him, it felt like you were exposing me too. And maybe you were. Maybe I deserved that. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to stop him. I know that now. He met my eyes. Doesn't change what I said, how I treated you. I'm sorry. For all of it. For every dinner where I didn't speak up. Every achievement of yours we minimized. Every time I let them treat you like you were less. I didn't realize I'd been waiting to hear that until he said it. Thank you. I don't expect us to be close. I don't even know if we can be friends. But Rebecca's right. You're still my sister, and I'd like to know you. The real you. Not the pretty daughter or the corporate raider or any of the other boxes we tried to fit you into. We didn't magically reconcile, didn't hug and promise to rebuild our relationship, but we exchanged phone numbers. Started with occasional texts. Slowly, carefully, built something new from the ruins of what had been destroyed. Rebecca helped. She'd lost her own family to addiction and understood that family was something you chose to maintain, not something owed by blood. Blood makes you related, she said at dinner one night. Choice makes you family. Mira liked her immediately. 20 years after the takeover, I stood at Mom's funeral. The Alzheimer's had progressed slowly, then all at once. She'd spent the last 3 years not knowing anyone. I'd visited monthly. She'd always greet me as a pretty girl who reminded her of someone. I'd sit with her and tell her about my life, the parts she'd missed, the parts she couldn't remember. Ethan gave the eulogy. Spoke about the mother she'd been before everything fell apart. The one who'd read bedtime stories and baked cookies and tried her best within the limitations she'd placed on herself. She was a product of her generation, he said. Taught to value certain things, to prioritize her husband's success over everything else. She made mistakes, but she also did the best she could with the tools she had. I wasn't sure I agreed, but I understood why he needed to believe that. At the reception, distant relatives approached me. Cousins I hadn't seen in decades. Aunts and uncles who'd taken sides, chosen Dad's narrative over the truth. Most avoided me, but one aunt, Dad's sister, pulled me aside. I owe you an apology, she said. I believed the family narrative, that you'd turned on us, destroyed your father out of spite. I didn't look at the evidence, didn't want to believe my brother was capable of what he did. And now I've spent 20 years watching the victims try to rebuild their lives, reading the court transcripts, understanding what he actually did. She touched my arm. You didn't destroy the family. You stopped him from destroying more families. I should have said that years ago. Small vindications, 20 years too late, but I accepted them. That night, Mira and I sat on our porch watching fireflies. Do you think about it? She asked. That night at dinner, if you'd do it differently now? All the time, I admitted. Sometimes I think I should have been gentler, given them a chance to change before I burned everything down. Other times I think I should have moved faster, exposed them sooner. But I did what 17-year-old me needed, what 21-year-old me was capable of. I can't judge that from where I am now. Do you regret it? I thought about all the paths not taken, the family I might have had if I'd chosen silence, the relationships that might have survived if I'd been less ruthless. But I also thought about the 50,000 patients Cassandra's clinic had served, the hundreds of women whose businesses I'd funded, the victims who'd gotten restitution, the lives changed because I'd refused to stay silent. No, I said, I don't regret it, but I'm glad it's over. 25 years after the takeover, I wrote a book. Not a business memoir, not an exposé, just my story. The pretty daughter who was never supposed to be smart. The systemic dismissal disguised as love. The choice between family and justice. The aftermath. My publisher wanted to sensationalize it. Daughter's Revenge, how I destroyed my father's empire. I refused. Instead, I called it Seen, and it was about being invisible in plain sight. About women who are valued for appearance over competence. About choosing yourself when your family won't choose you. About the complicated grief of losing people who never really saw you in the first place. The book tour was exhausting. Everyone wanted the dramatic story. The takedown, the courtroom moment, the revenge served cold. I talked about the cost instead. The loneliness, the therapy, the years of nightmares, the complicated feelings about hurting people who'd hurt me first. Was it worth it? Every interviewer asked. That's the wrong question, I'd answer. The right question is, what else could I have done? Stay silent while they defrauded thousands? Protect family loyalty over justice? Spend my life being dismissed and diminished? So you'd do it again? I'd do something. I don't know if I'd do it the same way, but I'd do something. The book became a bestseller. Not because of the business drama, but because thousands of women saw themselves in it. The daughter overlooked for her brother. The employee dismissed despite superior performance. The wife whose intelligence threatened her husband. The girl told she was pretty enough to not need to be smart. They wrote to me, told me their stories. Some had fought back. Others had stayed silent. None of them felt they'd chosen correctly. All of them were still dealing with the aftermath. There's no right answer, I wrote back. Just the answer you can live with. 30 years after the takeover, I stood in a gallery exhibiting my paintings. Not the angry ones from years ago. These were different. Complex. Layers of color and emotion that didn't fit into simple categories. Pain and healing, loss and growth, the full spectrum of what it meant to survive your family and build yourself from the fragments that remained. A young woman stood in front of one painting for a long time. She was maybe 22, had that look I recognized, polished exterior, storm underneath. This one, she said when she noticed me. It's called Unseen. What does it mean? I studied my own work. Dark blues and purples fading into brighter colors. A figure emerging from shadow into light, but the light was harsh, revealing scars. It's about being invisible, I said, and then being seen, and realizing that being seen isn't always healing. Sometimes it just means your pain is visible too. She nodded slowly. My family doesn't see me. They see what they want me to be. Are you going to let them? I don't know how not to. I pulled out a business card, my investment firm. When you figure out who you are, what you want to build, call me. I fund people everyone else overlooks. She took the card with shaking hands. Why? Because someone should have done it for me. 35 years after the takeover, I sat with Ethan at a coffee shop near his house. We'd built something over the years. Not the sibling relationship we might have had if we'd grown up differently, but something honest. We met quarterly, talked about our lives, debated politics and books, avoided the past unless we needed to excavate it. Rebecca and I are having a baby, he said. Congratulations. I'm terrified. Of course you are. You grew up in the same house I did. He stirred his coffee. I keep thinking about how Dad made me feel like I had to be the smart one. How Mom made you feel like you had to be the pretty one. How we were both trapped in these narrow definitions of worth. And I don't want to do that to this kid. Don't want them to spend their life proving something to me. But I don't know how to do it differently. I thought about all the children I'd mentored over the years. The daughters of women I'd funded. The young people who reminded me of teenage me. You know what they all needed? What I needed? What? Someone to be curious about who they actually were, not who we needed them to be. Just curiosity. Who are you? What matters to you? What lights you up? That's it? That's the hardest thing in the world. Really seeing someone. Not projecting, not molding, just witnessing and valuing what's actually there. He nodded slowly. Will you be in their life? The babies? Do you want me to be? Yes, he said without hesitation. They should know their aunt. The real one. Not the villain from Family Stories. The person who was brave enough to tell the truth even when it destroyed everything. I wasn't brave. I was angry. Same thing sometimes. 40 years after the takeover, I donated most of my fortune to endowments. Scholarships for overlooked students, funding for women's businesses, medical care for fraud victims, the clinic Cassandra had built, now serving multiple states. And I spent too long accumulating wealth as a shield, as proof of worth. I don't need that anymore. I was 62, gray-haired, lines on my face earned through years of feeling deeply, still painted, still invested in businesses. Ironically, Cassandra retired from running the clinic, passed it to younger doctors she'd trained. We had lunch monthly. Do you ever regret it? She asked once. The takeover, the exposure. Don't regret the consequences I brought to people who'd harmed thousands. That's not a full answer. It's the only answer I have. It's both true things at once. I had to do it. It cost me. Both things are real. She nodded. The economics department. They wanted me to talk about disruption in financial markets. I agreed to do it if I could talk about something else instead. I stood in front of 200 students. Fresh-faced, ambitious, sure they were going to change the world. Thinking I'm a hero, I said. Others think I'm a villain. You're both wrong. I'm a person who was harmed and who harmed others in response. I'm a person who chose justice over family and spent decades wondering if I chose correctly, whether my family recognized it. I'd stop trying to prove I was smart and just be smart for my own sake. I'd separate justice from revenge sooner. I paused. But I was 17, angry, hurting. I did the best I could with those tools. That's all any of us can do. They were who they were. I became who I am partially because of that. We all live with consequences. After the talk, students lined up to speak with me. Most wanted business advice. Find a good husband. That women in business are trying to be men. I looked at her. Really looked. Saw the anger brewing, the plans forming, the revenge taking shape in her mind. Don't make your career about proving him wrong, I said. And I did. What should I do? Build something remarkable, not to show him, for yourself. And when you've built it, don't let his voice live in your head anymore. That's the real freedom. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Held my hand through every appointment. Ethan called weekly. Rebecca sent care packages. Cassandra consulted on my treatment plan. I had people now. Family I'd chosen. That mattered more than the family I'd lost. During chemo, I had time to think about what I'd built. Be not defined by my family's dismissal, not defined by my success, not defined by revenge or vindication or any of the stories people told about me. Just existing, present, enough. Businesses I'd funded who'd become friends, artists I'd mentored, activists I'd supported. They asked me to make a speech. I declined, but I did say this. I've lived a long time, made mistakes and corrections, hurt people and helped people. Clearly, someone asked if I had regrets. Hundreds, I said, but they made me who I am, so I'll keep them. 80 years after the takeover, I sat in my studio, painting. My hands shook more than they used to. The colors weren't as precise. Warm light, the kind that shows flaws and scars and treats them as part of the whole picture. I titled it, Enough. A young woman knocked on my studio door, one of the recipients of my scholarship fund. She'd just finished her MBA, top of her class, had 3 job offers. I thought about 17-year-old me, about all the times I'd needed someone to believe in me, to see past the surface, to recognize value everyone else missed. Did you prove them wrong? I asked. No, she said with a smile. I stopped caring about proving anything. Look at it. The figure was imperfect, scarred, strong, standing in light that revealed everything, the beauty and the damage, the victories and the losses, the full, complicated truth of a life lived on her own terms. It looked like me, my body wearing out, ready to stop. Ethan visits, his children visit, their children visit. This extended chosen family I built from the ashes of the one I destroyed. They ask if I'm afraid. No, I tell them honestly. I did what I came to do. What was that? I think about it, how I fought back. But I fought, and I built something from the wreckage. That's enough. The last thing I paint is simple. No figure, no narrative, just color. Blues fading to purple, purple fading to gold, darkness to light, anger to peace. In Cassandra's clinic, watching lives being saved, in the garden with Mira, holding Ethan's grandchild, I'm everywhere I built myself to be. And my parents' voices, the ones that lived in my head for so long, are finally quiet. I wake up at dawn,